Hey, Christine, how are you?
I am good. How are you?
Well, thank you. I've been looking forward to this. Thank you for accepting the request to come and speak to me on Race and STEM. I believe that we've known each other for a number of months. And for those of you who don't know, Christine was a panelist of a discussion which I hosted at the Dublin Tech Summit
Hmm.
maybe about 6, 7 weeks ago now, actually, already. But I've had the
Same.
pleasure of getting to know you professionally, and obviously personally on the journey to where we are now. And I definitely wanted to be able to speak to you one on one for the world to see and hear you and a little bit more about your story. So thank you in advance. I'm
Mhm.
looking forward to the next 45 minutes or so.
Me
But
too.
let's start at the beginning. Give us a whirlwind tour of your life as Christine.
Oh, Lord. I'm okay. So, where to begin? How far back do you want to go? Birth?
Wherever you want to take us.
Yeah. My name is Christine Noonan. I am originally, my parents are Ugandan, and so I'm Ugandan. I speak Luganda. I grew up in Ireland, um, and I was raised by, I think from about the age of 10, 11, I was raised by an Irish foster family in the middle of nowhere in Cork, in a very small village called Liscarroll. The only thing anyone in Ireland could potentially know about Liscarroll is that we have the only donkey sanctuary in Ireland.
Donkey Sanctuary. I've not heard that before.
Yeah, it's a sanctuary for donkeys.
Okay. Where is that specifically again? What's it called?
Yeah, so it's in Liscarroll.
Niscaro.
Liscarroll.
There
Yeah.
you go.
So if you go out to Liscarroll, that's one of the things you could go and see. I think we had, I don't know, things might have changed a little bit now, but we had like one pub, we had one store, like it was the whole, yeah, it was like a proper small community. And so after that, I went to university out in Limerick. I studied economics. And while I was there, it's when I kind of really discovered this like intense and like obsession basically for like fashion. So I founded the Fashion Society, and it was sort of like it was amazing. We had so many members and we did so many activities and all of that. And I probably spent more time in that than I did in class. But it paid off because I've made fashion my career now. And about a year and a half ago, I started my own company, Klem, and that's what's basically been keeping me busy. I'm also married to a lovely Irish boy, and yeah, that's essentially like what's sort of like the overall sort of like picture for me right now.
It's interesting, you kind of given a very clear snapshot already in terms of what life was potentially like for you. I'm assuming, and please correct me wrong, that if you were living in a small town in Cork, that there weren't so many people who looked like you. I'm
No.
assuming that when you went to university, there weren't so many people that looked like you. So, with that being the case, how did you? And we can spend a little bit of time on this, but I don't want to spend too much time on it. Um,
Mm.
how did you feel when you were in these environments? Clearly looking very different to people who you were obviously loved by, because obviously you had your foster parents there. But how did you feel as a person of color within the education system, within the
Mm.
the wanting to be economic system, and then obviously fashion and things like that in general? And how did
Yeah.
you kind of navigate to where you are now?
Yeah, I think like early on, like when I was younger, initially I didn't really understand much about any sort of like difference. So like I knew I obviously looked different to like my friends and stuff, but I didn't really ever feel any specific treatment that I would have interpreted as, you know, oh, like that's someone being this because I'm that.
Yeah.
But I have like one, I mean, like I think now you kind of go back, and every now and then I go back and, you know, the dots kind of connect of like certain events that happened that I was like, oh, that was because, okay, now I get it. But there was like two like main things, kind of like little moments that I remember very well. The first time was when I was moved to Cork. So I moved from Dublin, which is, I mean, it's a small city, but it's the capital of Ireland, so it's sort of like a big city. So I was moved from Dublin to Cork, and I had to be enrolled into like a school in Cork, obviously. So that school, I was of course the only Black child there, and I remember, you know, signed up, all of that, did my registration. And I remember the first day of class being told, sorry, this was in secondary school. Yeah. So like being told like, oh, like you know, the teacher came out and was talking about how we were in English class, sorry. And the teacher was like, oh, you know, English is really hard and like all of this, etc. And I was sitting in the higher level class, and she was like, she kept talking about how like, you know, if you find reading and comprehension and all of that really hard, you should probably be in like the lower level class. But she was like looking straight at me, and I was so confused as to what was happening. So she gave us an assignment or homework that night. I brought it back the next day. And she called me over the next day and was like, hey, did anyone help you do this? And I was so confused. I was like, nobody helped me. And she was like, she couldn't, like, it was so hard. She was like, what? So we had like this sort of like back and forth for a little bit. Unbeknownst to her, like English and like reading and all of that was like my favorite pastime activity. So I'd read all the books. I was like, I wrote so much from when I was like a little kid. Like that's all I, you know, it was something I really did so well. And I didn't realize in that moment what was happening. So she looked at me and saw where I was from and all of that, and just decided that I'm going to be bad at this subject. And then when I did well, it was like, it's impossible that that was you that did that. And I feel like that kind of has followed me in, and most minority people will tell you that, like, it sort of like follows you, that sort of like underestimation because of what you look like. Follows you throughout your life, and then you find yourself constantly being put in this position of having to defend your work, not because of its merits or whatever, but because of what you look like, right? And I could never understood, like, I think honestly, like at that point, sorry, must have been, sorry, at that point I was 13, now that I remember, but I couldn't, at that, I would never understood that right there and then. That was the beginning, for the rest of my life, basically. And obviously in the end having to come to terms with it. Another moment, sorry, was, because this is a little bit funny. We were, I think 15, and went to summer camp, because, you know, we lived in a village. So it's kind of like, what are you going to do around here? So you're going to go and do summer camp with your fellow teenagers, so your parents can, you know, have a break. So we went to basketball camp, which I was a lousy basketball player. But I was like, I'll give it a go. So went to that, and this guy who was training us, the coach, comes in and he's telling us about the first thing we have to do is like to run back and forth on the court to like warm up. And before we begin, so I think he said we needed to do like 20 laps back and forth. And before we begin, he tells the entire class, he's like, she's going to outpace everyone here. Right? So I'd never like run in my life before this. I had zero exercise, but like I'm like, whoa, like how does he know, right? Like there must be something about me. But again, I'm not thinking race or whatever. I'm like, whoa, maybe there's just like the way, like my gait, maybe there's like the way I move that makes me so special, that I would be like very, you know, like I don't know. It's like I'm just in this moment, I'm trusting this adult to, he must know something I don't know, right? So naturally, the first lap we do, I like go for it because I have to prove what
Yeah.
this adult just told the entire class. I'm going to out. So I'm not even thinking about what my body is actually doing, what pace
Yeah.
I'm supposed to naturally be on. I'm just thinking that the energy is just going to come out of nowhere from wherever this man thought the source is. So I, of course, like within, I don't even finish the first lap and I'm just done. So I let us both down, basically. So yeah.
That's I was about to say that's so funny, but it's really not funny. You know, it's preconceived ideas, perception, right?
So,
Perception.
but these are the things that kind of then start to, right? So, of course, then the first one was you're not going to be able to do the things that people who look like me do really well. And then the
Hmm.
other one was like, these are the things people who look like you should be really good at, right?
Exactly.
Um, and then there's obviously like, of course, like those moments constantly.
Yeah.
So you're also just going back and forth on them.
Yeah. Oh, you've clearly had an upbringing through personal education, you know, even in your summer camps, where, you know, you could say the odds have been against you.
Mm.
Um, how did your upbringing inform the way you approached launching Klem? And if you can, maybe give an overview as to what Klem is.
Yeah. So Klem is it's a fashion tech startup. So what we are basically doing is we are I'm gonna say this in like kind of initially I'll give you like the jargon, and then like I would say it in plain terms. So
Yeah.
we're
Yeah.
basically like building like end-to-end digital wardrobe management. Which essentially like the idea behind that is that I mean, I've grown up loving fashion and like I've been in the industry for a really long time. And I recognize that most people, actually, like the majority of people, they really struggle when it comes to their wardrobes. And a lot of that struggle comes from the fact that brands will build like personalized journeys and like making it really easy for you to discover their products and to buy them. And that's it. But discovery in clothing and fashion doesn't end after you've bought a garment. We wake up most mornings being like, oh, I have this big thing coming up. Like, what do I wear? So that discovery is completely manual. Like you go into your closet, you pull out. Some people have a uniform, and that's fine. Some people will go into a closet and like, they have a trip coming up, and they just like dig in there and just try to see what goes together. Or and worst of all is we take shortcuts because this is too much. I'm just going to go and buy something new. So because it's such a manual process and the entire system and management is quite broken, so you buy something somewhere, you repair it somewhere else, you do whatever with it somewhere else, we tend to take shortcuts that lead to a lot of waste. And so right now, fashion sustainability is like a big topic. And a lot of the sort of work around it is with businesses. So like businesses doing better. And I wanted to look at consumers, not consumers doing better, but more around how can we like automate a lot of like what they have, because like when you wake up, you just want to know, what do I wear? That's it. So how can we create those answers just like that, so that we encourage you to just use what you have a little bit better and to think a little bit more before you buy, basically. So what we're trying to do with Klem is anytime you have a question about clothing whatsoever, you just ask Klem. And so it's making that process easier for you. So you don't have to think about it. You go do what you need to do in your life, and this is basically taken care of. And so, yeah, so that's been what we've been building. We launched last week our first public product, and yes, and it did amazing. We were the top downloaded paid app in Ireland, top 3 downloaded paid app in the UK, and at one point we got up to like top 10 in the US. So it was a
Wow.
massive, massive success. we didn't do any marketing, like we didn't pay for any marketing. A lot of the push was work that I've sort of been doing over the past year and a bit, kind of gathering, this sort of like interest, organic interest, like over time. And yeah, so speaking of gathering organic interest, then I can answer the other part of your question. I think something I was actually thinking about this the other day, like about my upbringing and how that has affected how I'm doing Klem. And I remembered very clearly one time, I think it was my first day in the foster care system, and I could not hack it. I was so upset. I obviously wanted to go home, and yeah, so much was going on. And I remember I had a phone call with my mom, so like my birth mom. And she said to me, she was like, hey, you could, yeah, I mean, you could be annoyed and you could react all in all the most not useful ways and all of that. She was like, but she was very much like, I understand, but this is happening, right? We don't know how long for, but it's happening. So now you get to decide what you want to do with that. So you could have a really, really bad time, or you could just put yourself out there and just live your life and just show up no matter how, no matter what. And at the time, I was so young, I didn't really, like, I was like, what do you mean? But over the years, it's something that sort of like come up for me over and over again, that, hey, like, things are going to be tough. They're never going to be easy. And you're going to face people who are going to be like, oh my God, what? But ultimately, you just keep showing up. And then finally, they can't get rid of you. And they're seeing you everywhere. And they're like, oh my God, we better listen, essentially. So yeah, that's been.
No, it's that's very interesting. If only we knew now what we knew back. If only we knew back then what we know now, and vice versa, however that terminology works. But
yeah,
that's clearly not easy to hear as a young girl. However, you can kind of, I'm assuming you can obviously make sense to the saying now. And clearly that's been an approach as an entrepreneur that you have to have. You can't just have an idea for it to be successful. You need to be on top of things. You need to be there for a while. You can't just have an idea and maybe play it out for a month. It has to be supported and grow, and you have to be around for a long time. The with this being the case with Klem specifically, and I know that we've spoken about this previously, the system, to play or to not play the system of being who you are in relation to what you're trying to achieve. Because I'm sure there are competitors out there who have had ideas similar and all these types of things, but how valuable has an authenticity been to your success so far?
Honestly, like, I think being authentic within myself and showing up as I am has been like a massive like advantage, because it just takes away that like layer of like stress that comes with needing to pretend otherwise. So this authenticity comes in, so not just, hey, like, I'm African, I'm Black, this is what I look like, and I'm going to show up how I want, no matter what you think or whatever. I'm not going to try to speak the way you need me to speak, or my hair, like, many times is very, like, and I understand how people, wear their hairs different ways and stuff, but like mine is either like in a little afro or it's in braids, like it's as African as I can absolutely show up, and really leaning into that power, which it is power, has been incredible for me, because I've always felt like, because I've grown up in spaces where I've felt underestimated, usually on the other side of that is people being like, wait, what? She can actually do this, or like she's actually doing this, or whatever, because they started with underestimating. So I actually do take it as a power when that underestimation happens now. And so it's And also the other side of that is like, is even as an entrepreneur, you are constantly being expected to behave or to basically act in ways that like real entrepreneurs apparently act. But real entrepreneurs are like white white male, right? So this is who this system has been built by, has been built for. And so when you see like investors and where they put the money, an abysmal 2% for women, an abysmal like less than 1% for Black women. I think it's like 0.2 something something, right? And you're basically like looking at the other, like you're constantly then putting yourself in a place where you're like, oh, like I look nothing like what these people say all the time. And so when they give me feedback, they're they're thinking that they're giving me feedback for me to improve, but what they're really saying is like, I actually just think you just need to be like this other, like what I constantly see. Or they're saying, well, like this could be a good idea, but I've never seen anyone who looks like you do something like this, so I can't really believe you, right? And a lot of this stuff comes from a subconscious mindset as well. It's like subconscious bias. So you're fighting things that are in the shadows constantly. And the best thing you really can do, that's like, for me, has been the least stressful, has just been to just show up as I am anyway. And as it has happened, like the right people will listen eventually at some point.
Yeah, because you're your brand. You are, people want to invest in you. They know who you are from the get-go.
Yeah, especially in the beginning. I think like at the beginning when you don't have anything, so like when you don't have any numbers in terms of like, oh, like we've sold this many or we've done this.
Yes. Yeah.
When you need money to do that initial sort of like development, like people are investing in you as a person. And for a lot of Black, especially Black entrepreneurs, that what stops them from being able to go any further is that very fast check. So that initial like check, because that check usually comes from a certain amount of social capital, right? That unfortunately, like most of us, like we have to make ourselves. So I have to go put myself everywhere to create that social capital. But a lot of others like have that support from parents or whatever and all of that kind of stuff.
Generational wealth.
Yeah, generational wealth, which the majority of like Black minorities just don't have access to that. So how do you when you look at the investment numbers and you're like, oh my God, like Black people never get invested in, it's not that we are not thinking of amazing things, right? It's that this very fast check where someone is like, hey, like you haven't figured this out properly yet, but I see you and I trust you and I want to bet on you. This is where we're looking for help, and this is where like we need support, because when I'm number one or number three in the UK downloads, everyone is going to come and everyone is going to want to give me money, right? But how do I get to that stage, essentially?
Yes. Where I already know, but to our listeners, where are you now with Klem as a company? I think you shared some great information with me when we were in Ireland together, but from how did you go to get funding? What's the process? What are the pros and cons, the challenges, and where are you with it all now?
Yeah, so I think in the beginning, I did the mistake that most like first-time entrepreneurs sort of do. And I was in an incubator that essentially, like when you're in these incubators, like they train you for how do you make your ideas sound fundable, and less about how do you make it like something that's useful to customers, right? We anyway, it's fine. I'm trying to focus on the positive. So I sort of like in the beginning, we did have some offer for investment, but that offer was only if we did our thing a completely different way to what we were actually trying to do. I was brave enough to walk away from that. which it's not even bravery, was a smart thing to do. But I mean, I think funding is like this glory, whatever, that a lot of people think it's everything, when in fact it's just the beginning of what you're actually supposed to be doing. And so what the approach I then sort of like took was, hey, like I'm going to focus on building something that people want. I'm going to focus on how do I make this for my customers, how do I make this something that they want to come back to, that they want to support? And, you know, the investors will come. And so all of our like investor outreach and stuff. So like our first like main angel investor, James, actually phoned me on LinkedIn across an article I'd written or something like that. Like we didn't know each other, but he followed me for a while and he saw how passionate and all of that I was about Klem. And he wanted to give me money, like I think 9 months ago. And it was like, we're not ready, you know? And I feel like that attitude of, you know, I don't want to take money for the sake of it or because it validates anything, has actually made us seem like more investable, because it's kind of shown like our approach of like, we're doing this thing, and when we're ready, we will take support. And investment and that kind of money is to support and propel. It's not the end and be all. And like, we're not making it all about that. And kind of showing that you're building with purpose. Like, this is what I want to do. This is why I want to do it. And you're welcome to come with us on this journey. And so then honestly, like, I think a lot of we did have, like, a lot of our investors generally have all just reached out. I swear to God, like, I think we did do some applications and stuff just to sort of like see what that system looked like or whatever. But the ones who were like coming on board now, it's been, they saw me somewhere, they saw Klem somewhere, and they're interested.
That's brilliant. I was speaking at an event about 3-4 weeks ago, and on the panel, the individual who was hosting the discussion said, "It's not about who you know; it's about who knows you." And you know, it was one of those light bulb moments where everyone's just like, "Yeah, that's true." You know, if you know someone or if you know something for what they are, and you're bought and you're invested into, wow, you know, just like how you might follow someone, you know, a celebrity or, you know, influencer on their Instagram or their TikTok or their LinkedIn profile, literally just like what happened to you. This man called you up out of nowhere. He said his name was James, and just went, who are you? You know, I'm interested. What a fantastic story. That's great.
Yeah, honestly, that, and sorry, like I'll just say this. I think if you put yourself, like literally what you just said there, like a lot of investment money goes to who investors know. So a lot of investors actually won't even look at your pitch if they don't know you in some way, which is what makes a lot of this stuff very messy. So I looked at what looks like a very messy system, which is, you know, if they don't know you, it doesn't really matter what your business is or whatever, like unless it's literally changing the world in, like, you're creating something on the moon or whatever, they're never going to really respond because of so many other biases that are going on. And I decided, like, instead of focusing on that and trying to like break through that messed up system, like, and fighting those kinds of shadows, I might as well like make my own way and be like, hey, like, maybe you won't invest in me because you don't know me, my name looks weird to you or whatever, but I'm going to go and do what I want to do, how I want to do it, provide value in ways that you find yourself like seeing me on stage somewhere and you're like, whoa, who's this person? And instead of us, I think, constantly saying like, oh, like, why are they not investing in Black people? Or like, why are they not doing this or whatever? I think we should just do and add value in the ways that we see ourselves adding value. And they'll come knocking. Like, it's like a natural thing. Like, people are attracted to success naturally, you know?
It's an interesting point you raised there. And I want to ask your opinion. I mean, you network quite a lot. What improvements have you seen over the last few years in terms of representation? Now, that could look like fellow entrepreneurs. It could look like investments, coming towards people in general. From your perspective, what's it looked like over the last couple of years?
I don't know that I've seen like improvement that specifically goes anywhere. Like I honestly think that the improvements that I see are from like people like me, like minorities in this sort of world, just basically like taking the bull by its horns and just going after what they want to do anyway, and just doing it. And like I think the internet is allowing a lot of this. Like, I mean, like LinkedIn has been everything for me, where I've been able to say what I think and what I mean and what I want to do, like my dream and the problem I'm solving and all of that kind of stuff. And it hasn't really mattered like what I look like. And because I have that platform, I've been able to really take charge of it and really use it well. And I think for a lot of minorities, like women and, anyone that's not like a white male, this is something where like they're building their sort of like their profile in terms of like, showing that they're an authority in their industry of choosing, and just kind of going for it, right? I feel like there's been a lot, and I'm not gonna shame any of the efforts, but there's a lot of stuff around diversity investments. And these companies or like firms being like, hey, like we want to back minority founders, or like specific investors saying that they back minority founders. But except for actual investment funds that are owned and led by minority founders, like the rest of them are yet to actually prove like where their support actually really is going to, because a lot of them will still only support you when you've gotten a certain amount of traction, which again, as we said, if you're not coming in at the very beginning where like most minorities are looking for that support, you're basically joining at the time everyone else is joining anyway. And there's like a story actually heard recently. I've forgotten the lady's name. She's amazing. She's a Black lady in the US. And she was at one point, just a couple of years ago, she was one of only 25 Black women in the United States who had raised more than $1 million in investment. 1 million. 1 million is like 1 year runway, if even. And so 25 women, which is just, anyway. But she said when she got that money, she was like, oh my God, amazing. I've hit through the glass ceiling. Like I've done it. I've done it for my people. I've done it for myself. So excited, right? And then she said immediately the investor sat her down and was like, oh, just so you know, like we're writing this off. Like we don't think you can do it. And she was like, what? Because usually when an investor gives you money, it's not just money, they give you like a whole support system. So they refused to give her a support system. And it turned out it was generally just a diversity check. So for them, for her, that 1 million was everything, right? For Black women in the US, that 1 million was like, whoa. But for them, it was just like a little. And what that did then is they took photos of her, right? And like shared the story, like did the press conferences of like how they've invested in a Black woman. That brings them way more money, right? Because all these other entrepreneurs are like, oh, wow, like they're a diversified, blah, 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 they care, blah, blah. So like, I'm going to go give them my business too. So basically, the notion of being used like as a Black entrepreneur trying to do something by these investors is like a huge thing that no one actually talks about. It's like they will write you the diversity check so that they can stand and take photos and tell everybody that they're diverse and all of that,
This is excellent information to hear, because through the STEM network, the scientists, the technologists, the engineers, those from financial services, probably not so much. But to those who are wanting to follow in your footsteps of starting a career as an entrepreneur, to be a CEO of their company, this is excellent information to hear, because I obviously came from an industry when, in music, for example, you're given a record deal, a £5 million record deal, and that sounds great on paper. Just like this £1 million investment, However, what that actually means behind the scenes is something very, very different. And it's good to hear you speak like this, very honest and very raw, so that people can hear. With this being the case, what this author that you can't remember, please let me know the name of her when you can. It shows the and through yourself as well, the importance of support, the importance of network, the importance of solidarity. How important is mentorship and role models in today's day and age for people who are coming up? You know, did you have a role model yourself that helped shape your experience in tech?
Yeah, no, I think it's everything. By the way, I think having someone that you can go back to and be like, hey, this is the situation. What do I do? Or how have you done it and stuff, like, is absolutely everything. Someone who's been in similar footsteps, ideally. And it's not that they will tell you what you need to do, like step by step, but that they understand. I think that's like, it's been everything. I think from I've always had mentors in every environment I go into. So whether that was in work or it was whatever, I have like one lady, actually, I'm going to give her a mention. Her name is Maureen Murray. And I met her about 6 years ago. Hi, Maureen. I met her about 7 years ago, and she was chair of Tech for Good in Dublin, and we did some work together. At the time, I was working in tech, but I was kind of like just really starting out, and Tech for Good was a way for me to like really get into it. And ever since that day, Maureen mentions my name in every circle that she feels like would be beneficial. I don't pay her anything. There's no like nothing. In fact, like she pays me. She's had me speak at events that she's organized, and she's paid me for that, right? Like she's honestly, like it's so hard to even explain, but like she's the person who's genuinely championing, someone she really believes in. And she's not going around being like, I champion Black women, right? She's just doing it because she believes in me, and it just naturally comes to her to champion other people. And I think having people like that, if you can find them and if you can make the effort to find them, like it's everything.
That's beautiful. Hi, Maureen. Thank you for being you. More people like you are needed. And the thing is as well, what I think is important here, and I'm sure you would agree, Christine, is that this isn't a witch hunt at all about what people of color feel they're due or owed, or it's simply a case of, give an equal seat at the table, give the equal opportunities. To change other people's mindset of simply because you're a woman of color who's Black, it doesn't necessarily mean that you can run miles at the speed of lightning. Simply because you're a person of color, it doesn't mean to say that you can't read a book and be educated and speak English eloquently, maybe with a little bit of an accent, Because you're Black, it doesn't mean to say that you can't have an idea which is come into fruition, which is within the top 3 in one country, number 1 in another country, and potentially in the top 10 of one of the biggest countries in the world. And you clearly are a success story, and I know that you are going to be some form of inspiration, if not already, to up and coming entrepreneurs. I'm really excited about where you're heading. I love to hear your story about where you've come from to where you are now. In closing, drawing on your experience, what would be the best piece of advice, or a piece of advice to young women of color wanting to take an entrepreneurial route into industry?
I think if you're just starting out, so like you are at the beginning of your career or somewhere in the middle, I mean, for me, I kind of always knew I was going to do something like this. I don't know how to explain it. I just sort of like knew. So I kind of designed my entire career around that. So I worked in startups, like I worked with engineers. I did literally like activists, was seeking out those opportunities, knowing
Yeah.
that network was what was going to help me do like make this like a little bit easier. So I think like the top thing is definitely what do you have to say that the world should care about, right? In your industry of choice, what is it like that you're so passionate about? What is a problem that you feel like I have some solutions or I have some opinions on this? Then go and talk about that. Go and add value. Do, yeah, essentially like basically like make yourself someone, not someone that's like asking the world to give them things, but someone that's giving out into the world. So whether that's connecting people you think should know each other, like that, you know, connecting them to opportunities or connecting friends or whatever, acquaintances who could actually work well together, whether that's giving advice or like taking on like young mentors, like give into the world. And honestly, like the universe, it's something that we're told all the time, but like it's so true, because naturally then people come to you, right,
Yes.
looking to give you because you're giving out. And to just avoid that attitude of like no one cares about what I have to say, or like no one, you know, why should they care, basically, you know, and just don't give up. Honestly, like just keep at it. Something I really want to add actually before we go as well, I think for a lot of not just young women of color, I think just people of color who are entrepreneurs or who have any kind of platform, I think it's really important that we also take responsibility for how do we make things better for the people who look like us and for where we come from. So something like I do with Klem now is like we just hired our first full-time engineer, and he's in Uganda, which is where I'm from. We speak the same language. It's pretty cool in meetings. We can, when it's just the two of us, we speak in Uganda, and like it blows my mind. But this is something I always wanted to do, and it was actually like a massive, like as I was starting Klem and stuff in my company, I was like, I would love to be able to hire developers in these countries, because you know code is code. You can either write it or you can't. But for a really long time, the West has been throwing the opportunities that we don't want to touch out into these countries, when in reality there is so much intellect and, you know, ability very similar to where we live, that why are we not, you know, if you're in a position to create those opportunities and to give those chances, then absolutely go and do that, right? But yeah, I think that has been like a big, when he signed his contract, I actually cried. I was like, there's like a little moment of just like,
there's a joy.
Yeah, it was just like joy. And it's something I really hope if we get to do Klem long term, I would love to build out like a full-on hub out there, because it's just, and you know, we pay above market wage. We pay above market wage, market average there, but like it's of course like a bit lower than here. So commercially it makes sense as well, you know.
Listen, I look forward to seeing, as I said, the growth of Klem. I've spoken about Klem because when you first told me about it, my jaw dropped. I was like, wow.
Yeah, you were going on a trip, right? You're like, wait, can I use this now? Can you pack for me?
Yeah, I was like, oh my gosh, you know, I just because I know you, I'm hoping for some form of, you know, Klem discount potentially, you know, long term or something, you know, put in a passcode or something like that. But no, in all seriousness, I'm 100% in support of this business. I wanted to get you onto Racing STEM here to speak one-on-one so that we could discuss you and what you represent in the form of Klem, to support the business, to support you as an individual, and you know the story as well in terms of how you got to where you are, some of the hurdles, some of the challenges. You know, we've probably not even touched the surface, so we might have to do this again in a number of months. You know, Steve and Christine part 2. To see the success of where you are, you know, maybe in 6 to 12 months' time. But thank you so much. I really do appreciate you. I will be telling the masses of people, you know, who I know to download Klem, and, you know, support the cause. But listen, continue doing what you're doing. I'm really happy that we've got to connect. and we will 100% be catching up again in the near future.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much.
No problem. Thank you, Christine.
Okay, bye.